Imagine the following scene. You plan your life for two, dreams of the independence of the newly formed couple, but suddenly you are hostage to a true emotional blow disguised as maternal love. This is exactly what happened to Tatiana, an independent and successful woman who, without realizing it, opened her doors from home to a sneaky invasive her own mother-in-law. It all started with those apparently innocent comments during wedding preparations. After the party I will need to rest. My son deserves to return me all the care I had with him. Loose phrases, said with a dramatic sigh between one bouquet and another, which Tatiana attributed to prenuptial nervousness. After all, who would imagine that those veiled complaints would hide a meticulous occupation plan? Ludmila Veniaminovna, at age 50, was the image of respectability, well-arranged, with a stable job as an accountant in a small company and a modest salary of 4,000 triaris. But behind the dedicated woman's facade a master of manipulation was hidden. From the first contact, Tatiana noticed something strange. The mother-in-law lived sick, mysterious migraines, inexplicable pains that, by a miracle, disappeared as soon as Dennis appeared with shopping bags or an envelope with money. It was as if her body worked in theater mode. The stage was her son's life, and symptoms, mere accessories to ensure attention and resources. Dennis, a 30-year-old man with a heart as large as his inability to say no, had been raised by his mother alone since he was 3, after his father's abandonment. Ludmila knew how to plant a poisonous seed in him, the guilt. "I gave up everything for you, your father left us, but I never gave up," repeated phrases like mantras that turned the child into an emotional hostage. The result? An adult capable but paralyzed by the obligation to please at any cost. For him, denying a mother's request was like betraying a sacred oath. Tatiana, on the other hand, was the opposite. Independent, owner of a 2-bedroom apartment in the city center, grandmother's inheritance, and with a promising career as a sales manager at a multinational. At 28, he finally found in Dennis the tranquility he sought. Yes, his excessive connection with his mother bothered her, but she believed that over time the boundaries would be established. What a mistake! The marriage, simple and intimate, has already given the first signs that something was very wrong. Ludmila passed the entire ceremony as if she were in a wake, tablets swallowed with theatricality, deep sighs, complaints of extreme tiredness. "I need to leave, I'm exhausted," he said, then clinging to his son's arm with tears in his eyes. "But how to leave my only son on the most important day of his life?" It was pure staging, an essay for the final blow. And the blow came. After the honeymoon in Turkey, the couple returned home and found Ludmila installed in the living room, surrounded by bags and boxes. Without warning, without consultation, the mother-in-law had rented her apartment for a ridiculous and decreed, "My time to rest. You will take care of me now." Dennis, stunned, did not know how to react. Tatiana, in turn, felt the blood freezing. It was not a visit, it was an invasion. Ludmila's arguments were unbeatable, at least for those who did not see the trap. "I worked 50 years, my health can no longer take it, I need the affection of the family." Tatiana tried to resist. "Dennis, we are newlyweds, we need our space." The answer was a show of tears and accusations. "No one wants me, I gave my life for this boy, and now I'm a hindrance." Dennis, of course, gave in. After all, how to counteract the woman who sacrificed for him? What should be temporary has become a no-dead nightmare. Ludmila turned the room into her headquarters, old furniture taking up space, objects scattered like in a thrift store, and herself enthroned on the couch like a depressed queen. Her days began at noon when she woke up demanding coffee in bed. Then came the maximum soap opera marathon, interspersed with orders. "Tatiana, brings me a glass of water, go to the pharmacy to get my medicine, today I want to dinner something special." Any attempt to divide tasks was aborted with medical excuses. "My back can't take sweep, my pressure rises if I wash dishes." But criticize. This she did with Olympic energy. Lunch was salty, Tatiana's blouse was vulgar, the house's storage left to be desired. Dennis, exhausted at work, came home and was bombarded with daily reports of his wife's flaws. "She makes noise too early, don't buy the things I like, there's no respect for me." In a month, Tatiana became an unpaid maid in her own home. He cooked, cleaned, washed, shopping, And at night he still heard sermons about his incompetence. When I tried to talk to Dennis, he advances, "Give me a while, love, I'll talk to her." But conversations never happened, or ended with Ludmila crying and threatening disappearing from their lives not to disturb. Until it came to the drop of water. After an infernal day at work, a lost millionaire negotiation, a scolding of the boss and a cold rain on the way back, Tatiana came home and found the usual scene: Ludmila stretched on the couch, biscuit crumbs on the floor, TV all volume. Without a hi, the mother-in-law attacked, "This bread you bought is hard, forgot my vitamin in the pharmacy, this cup is badly washed." Tatiana, in silence, went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Ludmila followed her, continuing her monologue about the lack of consideration of young people. That's when, while the mother-in-law tried to teach her to cut onion, something inside Tatiana snapped. With a scary calm, she turned and said, "Enough. I can't take it anymore." Ludmila smiled, triumphantly, like who finally revealed her letters. "I raised her husband, now it's your turn to take care of me. Did you think you were going to marry him?" What did Tatiana do next? Well, let's say Ludmila is still in shock, and it is no coincidence that this case has become a story. Because when a woman decides to recover her home, her dignity and her peace, until the best-designed manipulation collapses. And believe me, the retaliation was up to the abuse. Ludmila was determined to live there until her last days, so get used to. Tatiana put the knife, wiped her hands on the plate cloth and nodded with an almost imperceptible smile. In his mind, a plan formed, bold, risky but necessary. There was no room for half-measurements: either she recovered control of her own life, or she would be swallowed by the chaos of others. The next day, while Dennis went to work and Ludmila settled on the couch to watch her morning programs, Tatiana announced that she would also leave her job. The mother-in-law lifted an eyebrow, but did not give much importance after all. Which woman would not dream of dedicating herself exclusively at home? A week later, Tatiana resigned, alleging stress and exhaustion. She told her husband and her mother-in-law that from then on, she would be a housewife, devoted to her family. Dennis accepted the decision with understanding, Ludmila, with a smile of approval. Finally, it seemed to think, the girl got in the axles. But the joy of the mother-in-law was short-lived. Tatiana began to act strange. He woke up at noon, had coffee on the bed, and then settled next to Ludmila on the couch, calling his soap operas. When the mother-in-law complained, she responded with a glacial calm, "If I don't work, I have the same right to rest as any other non-employed member of this family." Ludmila demanded to prepare lunch. Tatiana sighed, massaging the temples, "I have a terrible headache. Did I ask to go to the market? My backs are killing me, and my pressure is by the heights. The worst." She said all this with such a convincing sincerity that Ludmila couldn't find loopholes. After all, they were exactly the same excuses she herself used for years. Gradually, the house collapsed. The refrigerator emptied, the dust accumulated in the corners, dirty dishes packed into the sink. Tatiana and Ludmila remained lying on the couch, exchanging disdain looks as they complained about the chronic fatigue, but neither made a mention of getting up. Dennis arrived from work and found a dantesque scenario: no ready meal, two real estate women on the couch, and a cold air of war between them. The mother accused her daughter-in-law with laziness. Nora replied that if both were unemployed, no reason to be the only one to work. The situation climbed. Ludmila tried to impose her authority, but Tatiana fired each attack with her mother-in-law's own weapons. When Ludmila argued that younger people should take care of the elders, Tatiana answered dryly, 50 years is not age for retirement. If you feel so old, why don't you require a certificate of disability? Dennis tried to intervene, appealing to his wife's common sense, but Tatiana staged such a well-rehearsed drama: tears, complaints about years of ignored sacrifice, the exhaustion of being treated as maid, that her husband was speechless. In a month, the apartment became a battlefield. Dennis, exhausted, began to cook for himself after office hours, wash his own clothes and clean the rooms he wore. When I demanded help, I received the same speech from both of them: "I'm sick, I have no strength." Ludmila began to realize, with a mixture of panic and anger, that her plan had gone out of culatra. She had imagined that she would be served in the comfort of her son's home. Instead, he was obliged to live with his own mess, with no one to clean it. Tatiana, relentless, mirrored every mother-in-law gesture, bringing the absurdity to the limit. The breaking point came when Dennis got sick with a strong flu. Lying with fever, he begged for tea or medicine, and the two healthy women on the couch ignored their requests. Ludmila complained of back pain, Tatiana, migraine. Each pointed to the other, ask her. It was then that Dennis, between courses and chills, saw. It was not lazy. It was a mirror. A cruel mirror that reflected his mother's face, and the image was grotesque. The next day, already recovered, he called Ludmila for a serious conversation. Rodeoli, he stated that he would not support two women capable of the productive age, much less would be their employee after an exhausting day at work. The mother-in-law tried the usual theatre tears, accusations of ingratitude, but Dennis didn't give in. He gave an ultimatum: either she went back to work and divided the tasks of the house, or got her bags. Ludmila tried to negotiate: I cook if she cleans. Tatiana, without moving from the couch, answered with a yawning: I can't cook. My fingers swell with rheumatism, and the smell of the kitchen gives me migraine. A week later, the mother-in-law gave up. He realized that Tatiana was willing to take that game to the end even if it meant living in the middle of the trash for months. With a theatrical sigh, she started packing her things. I can't take this hell anymore, he said, as if he were the victim. Dennis helped his mother take the boxes. Tatiana, impassive, accompanied the door scene, with an almost imperceptible smile. Before leaving, Ludmila could not resist. You destroyed this family with your selfishness. The daughter-in-law only leaned against the stop and replied, the advice I give, mother-in-law, this is, less sofa, more action. It is good for health and character. The day after Ludmila's departure, Tatiana woke up early. Even Dennis was surprised to find the impeccable house and the dinner ready when he arrived from work. Now that I have no bad influence nearby, she said, serving her a plate, I wanted to take care of my home again. Ludmila, meanwhile, was forced to get a new job. The 15,000 of rent did not pay her bills. He got a place in another company, but with a lower salary and more rigid bosses. He tried to hint at his son. I visited her on weekends, helped with shopping or repairs, but the idea of sharing the same ceiling? A month later, Tatiana returned to the job market, now in a better position, with higher salary and flexible hours. The couple's life flowed. Dennis, free from constant tension, rediscovered the woman who had married, smart, determined, and with a sharp sense of justice as a blade. Ludmila, in turn, took months to understand how her own tactics had been used against her. He complained to her friends about her daughter-in-law's wickedness, but they all laughed. She just gave you a lesson, Ludmila. And you needed it. A year later, the mother-in-law until she calmed down. He even demonstrated one or two gestures of, not exactly affection, but respect. After all, who better than her to recognize a strategist at height? Respect for Tatiana, however, was not a mere concession. It was the late recognition that this woman did not bow to pressures or let herself be dominated by power games. Ludmila finally understood that she was not facing a docile sheep, but a wolf who knew every trick of the flock. From then on, their interactions began to be guided by a fragile but solid balance, clear boundaries and a mutual respect that, if not sincere, at least it was pragmatic. Dennis, in turn, extracted from those turbulent months a lesson that would change his relationship with his mother forever. He has learned that taking care is not synonymous with surrendering to whims, much less feeding a parasitism disguised as affection. He began to distinguish, with surgical precision, the genuine Ludmil needs of his pathetic attempts at emotional manipulation. The mother kept working, living alone, and although she still rehearsed from time to time a dramatic sigh or a gesture of weakness, those numbers no longer stick. Dennis helped her in the really important subjects: a medical appointment, a house repair, but refused to turn into a woman's shit who was perfectly able to tie her own shoes. Tatiana, in the meantime, became a legend in the family. The woman who, without shouts, without doors knocking, without novel scenes, had put a disappointment in place. Its method, reflecting unacceptable behavior as a relentless mirror, was as simple as it was genial. 3 years had passed since that summer Ludmila discovered, on the skin, the bitter taste to live with a lazy selfish. And to this day, when I saw some known sustained on the couch, her eyes glazed on television, she felt a chill. Because he had experienced firsthand the hell that is dividing the ceiling with someone who confuses love with servitude. And for the first time in his life, he made a point of not repeating his own mistakes.